When most people are asked to name the daughters of Empress Maria Theresa, one name stands above all others: Marie Antoinette, the Austrian-born Queen of France, whose story has been retold in books, films, and series for more than 2 centuries. She is the Habsburg daughter the world remembers. But Maria Theresa had 16 children, and among her daughters stood other women of equal intelligence, political force, and historical consequence who have been almost entirely erased by their youngest sister's fame. None of them has been more consistently overlooked than Maria Amalia, the 8th child, the Duchess of Parma, the woman who governed an Italian duchy for 30 years, who dismantled a French-controlled administration with her own hands, and who rebuilt it into something that answered to no one but herself. She was 9 years older than Marie Antoinette. She outlived the revolution that killed her sister. She died in Prague in 1804, in exile, having lost her duchy, 2 of her adult children, and the person she grieved longest in her life. History has largely passed over her. This is her story. Maria Amalia Josepha Johanna Antonia was born on February 26, 1746, at the Hofburg Palace in Vienna. Her father was Francis I, Holy Roman Emperor. Her mother was Maria Theresa, who had spent the early years of her reign fighting half of Europe for the right to inherit her father's territories, and had by the mid-1740s secured her position as the dominant figure in Central European politics. The household into which Maria Amalia was born moved between the Hofburg in winter and Schönbrunn Palace in summer. The children who grew up in them understood from an early age that their lives were not theirs alone to direct. Maria Theresa organized the upbringing of her 16 children with deliberate structure. The children were divided by sex and grouped in pairs by age, each pair forming a unit of shared education and daily routine. The system was designed to produce obedient, politically useful adults, with the manners and skills appropriate to their rank and expected futures. But the system had an unusual effect on Maria Amalia. She had been born between 2 boys, Karl Joseph to one side and Leopold to the other. There was no female sibling close enough in age to be paired with her. She grew up effectively alone within a family of 16. She had no constant companion of her own age and sex among the children of the house. Her lessons, her hours, and her daily life were spent largely by herself. She was taught what was expected: arts, languages, music, needlework, and the standard curriculum for a Habsburg daughter intended to serve as a future consort at a European court. She was trained to be obedient, dutiful, and representative, but she did not meet these expectations in the way her mother had intended. From childhood, observers noted that she was intelligent and also stubborn, reserved, and prone to resistance. The word used for her repeatedly in the accounts of those years was difficult. It appears in letters and reports and does not seem to have been used with affection. Her father, Francis I, contributed to a different side of her character. He began taking Maria Amalia on hunting trips from the time she was 6 years old. These were not ceremonial outings designed to give the children a taste of nature. They were genuine hunts in real countryside, away from the palace and its protocols. She developed a lasting love of hunting, of horses, and of the outdoors that she maintained for the rest of her life. Other Habsburg daughters were distinguished by their accomplishments in music or embroidery. Maria Amalia was the one who wanted to be outside, on horseback, in the fields. When she made her formal debut in Viennese society as a young adult, she was considered striking. She was tall, well-featured, and drew attention in any room she entered. But attention in the court of Maria Theresa carried an obligation. It was noticed, recorded, and put to use. Of all her daughters, Maria Theresa appears to have had the most difficult relationship with Maria Amalia. The Empress expected her daughters to function as instruments of Habsburg foreign policy. They were to be disciplined, patient, presentable, and available for whatever marriage was strategically necessary. Maria Amalia had her own views and expressed them. She showed limited inclination to modify her behavior based on political convenience or her mother's expectations. The 2 women corresponded at length throughout their lives, and those letters document a relationship built on sustained pressure from one side and consistent resistance from the other. Neither fully yielded to the other. In 1767, when Maria Amalia was 21 years old, she fell in love. The man was Prince Charles of Zweibrücken, heir presumptive to the Palatinate Zweibrücken, the electoral Palatinate, and the electorate of Bavaria. By the standards of dynastic marriage, he was a serious candidate. He would inherit significant German territories and hold considerable influence in imperial affairs. Maria Amalia wanted to marry him. She said so to her mother. The answer from Maria Theresa and her chancellor, Prince Kaunitz, was no. The match did not align with the current direction of Habsburg foreign policy. Charles of Zweibrücken was not what was needed at that moment. Maria Amalia's feelings had no weight in the calculation. She protested. She was told to accept the decision. She had no legal, practical, or social recourse, and she knew it. She accepted the refusal. She did not accept it willingly, and she did not forget it. While she was being required to abandon Charles of Zweibrücken, negotiations were already underway for a different arrangement. The Spanish king, Charles III, had a cousin in Italy, Ferdinand I, Duke of Parma. Ferdinand was 22 years old in 1769 and had technically held the title of Duke of Parma since the age of 14, following the death of his father. In practice, the duchy was administered by its minister Guillaume du Tilliot, a Frenchman who had shaped Parma's political and cultural direction for years and who maintained the active backing of Louis XV of France. Ferdinand himself had no interest in governing. He was 5 years younger than Maria Amalia and was described by people who knew him as obstinate, rude, and excessively pious. His preferred activities were ringing church bells in local parishes and roasting chestnuts alongside the peasants of the Parma countryside. He did not concern himself with policy, had no intellectual ambitions, and showed no desire to occupy himself with the management of his own duchy. He was, in nearly every way that Maria Amalia would have valued, the wrong husband. Maria Theresa's purpose in arranging this marriage was not personal. Austria and Spain jointly wanted to end Parma's alignment with France and shift the duchy's political orientation toward their own interests. A Habsburg archduchess installed as Duchess of Parma would serve that goal. The calculation was strategic and the conclusion was clear. Maria Amalia's preferences were entirely absent from the equation. She was informed of the arrangement and was devastated by it. Maria Theresa offered what reassurances she could: a substantial dowry, an annual income from the Spanish court, and material comfort suitable to her rank. None of this addressed the actual problem. The problem was not financial. The wedding had originally been scheduled for late 1768. It was delayed repeatedly for reasons that had nothing to do with the principles. Pope Clement III refused to grant the necessary canonical dispensation because of ongoing disputes between the Holy See and the House of Bourbon. The situation remained deadlocked until February 1769, when Clement V died. His successor, Pope Clement XIV, granted the dispensation almost immediately. The proxy wedding was held in Vienna in June 1769. The groom was represented by Maria Amalia's younger brother Ferdinand. Maria Amalia stood at the ceremony, looking tired and visibly distressed. Her mother watched and recorded her concern. Maria Amalia never forgave Maria Theresa for this marriage. That judgment was not revised. On July 1, 1769, Maria Amalia left Austria. She was 23 years old and would not return in any permanent sense. Her brother Joseph II traveled with her south into Italy. On July 19th, at the Ducal Palace of Colorno, she married Ferdinand of France in person. Before her departure, her mother had delivered instructions with deliberate clarity. Be submissive. Adapt to local customs. Do not interfere in politics. Maria Amalia had listened. She did not intend to follow those instructions. The scale of what she encountered in Parma was considerably smaller than what she had left behind. She had grown up between the Hofburg and Schönbrunn, two of the largest and most elaborate palace complexes in Europe. The Ducal Palace of Colorno sat in the flat landscape of northern Italy, pleasant in its setting but modest by comparison. The duchy itself was a small state. Its court was limited in resources and ambition, and the immediate political situation was exactly what Austria and Spain had sent her to address. Du Tilliot controlled the administration, Louis XV backed him, and Ferdinand was content to leave the running of the state entirely in other hands. Maria Amalia also registered quickly and with some bitterness the position she occupied in the hierarchy of her mother's daughters. One of her sisters was being sent to Naples to become a queen. The youngest, Maria Antonia, was being prepared for France, to become Queen of France. Maria Amalia was a duchess in a small Italian state. The difference in status was real, and she felt it directly. She had been placed here without her consent, married to a man she had not chosen, and assigned to a duchy she had not wanted. She arrived and found a French-run administration ready to absorb her into its existing arrangements. She was expected to be visible but quiet and cooperative. She was neither. Within 2 years of her arrival, she had secured the dismissal of Guillaume du Tillet. In 1771, the minister who had run Parma for years was removed from his position. Maria Amalia replaced him with a Spaniard named José del Llano, recommended by King Charles III of Spain, Ferdinand's paternal uncle. She held del Llano in the position for less than a year. In 1772, she removed him as well. She then installed an Italian prime minister and constructed around him a cabinet of native Parmesans who owed their positions directly to her and to no foreign court. Ferdinand, who had always preferred religious observance and country pleasures to political administration, accepted each change without evident objection. He left the management of the duchy entirely to his wife. Ferdinand held the title. Maria Amalia held the authority. In 1773, when Maria Theresa sent a new Austrian ambassador to Parma with instructions to serve as Maria Amalia's political advisor and to maintain Vienna's influence in the duchy's affairs, Maria Amalia told the man directly that she no longer wished to receive letters from Vienna or from Madrid. The diplomatic connections were severed. She was governing Parma on her own terms and intended to continue without external direction or oversight. The public of Parma gave her names during these years, La Amata and La Signora, which translates as the Lady. She worked with her cabinet to strengthen the duchy's institutions, defend its independence from interference by larger powers, and support art, culture, and literature within the state. She had Ferdinand's name on official state documents, but she had her own name placed alongside his, making the arrangement visible in the official record. When Ferdinand issued orders that contradicted decisions she had already made, she overturned them. He did not resist. Her personal conduct gave her critics sustained material for complaint. Maria Amalia made no attempt to appear content with her marriage or with the limitations of her situation. She spent lavishly on clothes, jewelry, and entertainments. She organized elaborate parties at Colorno, where tables were set not only for the nobility, but for poor citizens of the city, all guests receiving the same food. She gradually replaced most of her ladies-in-waiting with young men from the royal guard. She dressed in men's clothing and walked through the streets of Parma at night, unaccompanied and unrecognized. She gambled at the officers' club. The Parmesan nobility, who considered her spending inappropriate for a duchy of modest scale, and resented the way she had dismantled the structures of influence they had relied upon, referred to her in letters as a Messalina, invoking the Roman empress associated with excess and scandal. She considered most of the Parmesan aristocracy useless and said so without hesitation. Among the general population of Parma, the judgment was different. She was known for genuine generosity toward the poor. At her parties in Colorno, common citizens sat at the same tables as aristocrats and ate the same meals. The reputation she built among ordinary Parmesans was that of a woman who spent freely and shared what she spent. The divide between how the nobility saw her and how the public saw her was sharp and remained that way throughout her years in the duchy. In Vienna, Maria Theresa watched all of this with growing concern. The reports from Parma were damaging the family's reputation, and the timing was sensitive. Her youngest daughter, Maria Antonia, was being prepared to marry the Dauphin of France, and any scandal at a foreign Habsburg court risked complications for that match. Maria Theresa wrote letters. Maria Amalia set them aside. The estrangement between them had been growing for years. There was one brief reconciliation in 1773, when Maria Amalia's first son, Louis, was born. It did not last. Maria Theresa died in 1780, She and her daughter never repaired the relationship. 7 children were born to Maria Amalia and Ferdinand during their marriage. Not all reached adulthood. Their first daughter, Carolina, born in 1770, later married Prince Maximilian of Saxony. Louis, born in 1773, became Duke of Parma after Ferdinand's death and later ruled briefly as King Louis the Ferns of Etruria, a short-lived kingdom created in central Italy when Napoleon restructured the peninsula's political map. Maria Antonia, born in 1774, named for her famous French aunt, eventually became an Ursuline abbess. Charlotte, born in 1777, also entered religious life. 3 younger children died in infancy or early childhood. Whatever the distance between Maria Amalia and Ferdinand as a couple, observers agreed that both were genuinely engaged parents. As spouses, they were poorly matched. As mother and father, they were devoted. The 1790s changed everything. The French Revolution, which had been building for years and had already swept away the monarchy Maria Amalia had watched from a distance, arrived as a direct and personal catastrophe on October 16, 1793. On that day, Marie Antoinette, Queen of France, was guillotined in Paris. She was 37 years old. She was the youngest of Maria Amalia's sisters, 9 years her junior, the one who had been sent to France while Maria Amalia had been sent to Italy, the one who had become the most famous woman in Europe, and then the most famous prisoner. The news reached Parma, and Maria Amalia did not recover from it. She mourned Marie Antoinette for the remaining 11 years of her own life. Her attitude toward France, which had already been shaped by years of political resistance to French control in Parma, shifted into something harder and more personal after 1793. France had taken her sister. That did not change. France was not finished. In May 1796, Napoleon Bonaparte led the French Revolutionary Army into northern Italy as part of a campaign that would reshape the peninsula's entire political arrangement within a matter of months. He reached Parma and presented Ferdinand with a calculation: allow French troops free passage through the Duchy or face occupation. Ferdinand hesitated. He was half French by blood, through his mother Louise Elizabeth of France, and he was not a man inclined toward confrontation. Napoleon then offered a separate arrangement: the island of Sardinia, a territory Napoleon did not in fact control, in exchange for Parma. Ferdinand declined. The French troops entered the Duchy. Ferdinand and Maria Amalia were permitted to retain their titles. The administration was taken over by French officials. The Duchy's tax revenue was redirected to fund the French military campaign in Italy. They were, in every practical sense, held in place with no authority remaining. In February 1801, the Treaty of Lunéville formalized the complete transfer of Parma into the French-controlled zone. Ferdinand's health had been declining for some time. His final months were marked by weakness and illness. He died on October 9, 1802. He was 51 years old. The cause of death was disputed at the time and has never been definitively established. Some concluded the death was natural, the result of illness. Others claimed he had been poisoned. 2 theories circulated in the aftermath. One held that Maria Amalia had arranged it, with the aim of reclaiming effective governing authority after years of French restriction had reduced her to a figurehead. The other held that agents acting on Napoleon's behalf had done it to accelerate the political transition of Parma into a new arrangement. No evidence was produced to support either claim. Maria Amalia attended the state funeral procession that the French authorities permitted. She walked alongside her daughters. When the ceremony ended, there was nothing left. On October 22, 1802, 13 days after Ferdinand's death, France formally annexed the Duchy of Parma. Maria Amalia was expelled. The court she had built from her first years in the Duchy, the government she had assembled by dismantling a French-run administration and constructing a native Italian one in its place, the institutions she had supported for 3 decades, everything she had built was dissolved. She was a widowed dowager duchess with no duchy to be dowager of. Her nephew, Emperor Francis II of Austria, offered her a place to live. He gave her residence at Prague Castle in the Kingdom of Bohemia. She arrived there with her 2 youngest daughters, Maria Antonia and Charlotte, and a small retinue of servants. The household that had once run a significant political court in northern Italy now occupied a quiet set of rooms in a Bohemian castle with a handful of attendants. She had governed a state. She had nothing now to govern. What remained in Prague was grief, accumulated and continuous. Her son Louis, who had been installed as King Louis I of Etruria after Napoleon restructured the territories of central Italy, died on May 27, 1803. He was 29 years old. Her eldest daughter Carolina died on March 1, 1804. She was 33. Within a single year, 2 of her surviving adult children were dead. Her sisters Maria Elizabeth and Maria Carolina, Queen of Naples, were traveling toward Prague when the end came. Neither arrived in time. Maria Amalia died on June 18, 1804 at Prague Castle. She was 58 years old. The cause of death was breast cancer, which had progressed over her final months while a series of respiratory illnesses had steadily reduced what remained of her strength. She had lived long enough to see the revolution kill her sister, long enough to see Napoleon take her duchy, and long enough to outlive 2 of her children. She died in a castle in Bohemia with her 2 youngest daughters at her side. Her body was buried in the royal crypt of St. Vitus Cathedral in Prague, alongside Bohemian monarchs and other figures of Habsburg significance who had been interred there over centuries. Her heart was removed separately and transported to Vienna. It was placed in the Herzgruft, the heart crypt of the Augustiner Kirche. This was the same church where, in June 1769, the proxy wedding ceremony had taken place. The ceremony at which she had stood tired and distressed while her younger brother stood in for a groom she had not chosen. 35 years after leaving that church as a bride against her will, her heart was returned to it and placed in the vault of her family. History has told the story of Maria Theresa's daughters almost entirely through Marie Antoinette. The youngest daughter, the most recognizable, the one whose story ends on a scaffold in Paris. That story is real and important. But the daughters of Maria Theresa were not a single narrative. Maria Amalia was never a queen. She governed a duchy that most people today would have difficulty placing on a map. She was sent there against her will at 23, married to a man she had not chosen, and told to be quiet and cooperative. Instead, within 2 years, she had removed the French-backed minister who ran the administration, declined to replace him with a Spanish equivalent, severed diplomatic ties with both Vienna and Madrid, and installed a native Italian government that answered directly to her. She ran that government for 30 years. She lost it to Napoleon's forces in 1796 and held on to the title until 1802. Then she was expelled, and her son died, and her daughter died, and she died in Prague in 1804, in a castle far from the Italian court she had built with her own decisions. She was not the famous one. She was not the one history chose to remember. But she governed. She made decisions that shaped the political direction of a real state for 3 decades. And that is not a small fact, even if it has taken a very long time to say it plainly.